Good evening, everyone. So tonight is the last night. Yahoo! Right, Nancy? That's what I thought. Yahoo! Third night, final night, putting this bag together. It will be this bag for those of you who haven't weren't here before. So this is the Akoma mini messenger. We're going to be completing the front tonight. So we're going to start out with completing this, and then we're going to put all the pieces together because the front is the last piece that we have to put together. So once we get that done, then we're just assembling the bag pieces themselves. So hopefully everybody can hear me okay. I listened back to some of the videos, and I actually realized I had some echoing. So I'm gonna just try to stay on one mic today, and then hopefully that'll clear everything up. So welcome, welcome, welcome. So the pieces that we're going to need for this evening are going to be all of the remaining pieces that we have not used for the most part, along with some of the ones that we've completed. So we're actually going to start with our front. And your front, we're going to need the zipper that we created in part one, the two pieces, when we cut this apart, the two different pieces that we have, the three pieces that we have when we cut it apart. So we're going to have 1, 2, 3, and the zipper. And then we're going to need both the front, and that's pretty much the front for this zipper pocket. And we're going to need the back. So we're going to need two pieces for that. And then we will also need the flap. So we're going to need the flat piece, but the flat piece we're going to put in after we've assembled everything together. So all of your pieces should be interfaced. These pieces that we cut should have Decoville light. So the main front pieces should have Decoville light on them, along with the woven interface. So we're just going to get started. So the first thing that I want to do before I start anything else is I want to install this flip lock here. So this piece here that flips up and down, I'm going to install that on the bottom piece first so that it's already installed. We're not going to install the top piece yet. We will rough fit it, and then we'll install the top piece once we've put the entire bag together. So it is something that we can put on after we're done. So for this bottom piece, you're going to need, if you bought the kit, you will need the one piece, and this does not require a screwdriver or anything, so you don't need your screwdriver right now. But we're just going to take out our little flip piece. So we need the flip piece, and in there should also be a little plate. So it's a metal backing plate that we should have as well, and it looks like this. So we're going to need that. Everything else we can put to the side for right now. Then we're going to take out this bottom piece here. So we're going to make sure that we have that piece ready to go. So I'm just going to get my piece here. All right, so this should be my bottom piece to my bag. And I'm going to pull that out. You will need a scrap piece of Decoville light or something to help back it so that it doesn't tear through to the front. So I'm going to use just a little piece of Decoville light. You can use a scrap piece of leather. You can use a scrap piece of anything that you have on hand. And it just helps to reinforce where we're going to put the little flip lock. So it's already, this piece has not been reinforced in any way. So we're just going to reinforce it. Set your lining to the side for right now. Excuse me. I actually started choking before I started this live, and so I'm a little bit choked up. I sort of like went down the wrong way. So I just want to make sure that I do have the right piece on my cutting mat because it's so similar to the flat piece. I just want to make sure my measurements are good here. Okay, so let's try. So I'm going to mark my centers top and bottom. That's just something that I always do. I fold it in half and make a little snip here. You can, if you would like, just mark on the back where the center is. So I'm just going to make a little snip. When you lay this down, it should be wider than it is taller. So the width of it should be wider. So just so that you know you have it laid on your cutting mat correctly. And I'm just going to I made this very simple. So we're simply going to center this, excuse me, we're going to center this top to bottom to mark for this. So I just need to find the center point. And right now I can see, because I marked the center, I can see that I have the center here. And I'm just going to mark that. So I'm just going to draw a straight line going down. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another line going across so that I have the center for my lock. And I looked at the video and I also realized that this wasn't right side up. Excuse me. So I tried to turn my cameras around so they're right side up. So please let me know if it's right side up. Yes, Nancy, that's the piece. I wasn't sure if you were telling me. So that's correct. So now what we're going to do is, once we have the center, we're going to mark down, and these are in the instructions, on our piece so that it's perpendicular. Seems, just to be clear, I marked it, but I just want to make sure. It just seems like a lot. Nope. Yeah, it's a lot. So let's mark this, and I'll change it in directions. Let's mark it at the center. It is kind of low down here. So let's mark it to the center, and I'll just do a line here. I'm reading the directions, and it says to mark down on my center line, down from the top raw edge. But I will change those marks, and we're just going to mark them on the center because that's really where it should be. I'm sorry, just give me 1 second. Draw a perpendicular line to the center line. Oh, I don't say how far down. Sorry, that's what it was. I didn't say how far down I go. So it's actually to the center. I just tell you to draw a perpendicular line. Excuse me, but it's actually centered. So if it's in the directions, I just say draw a line perpendicular to this line without telling you. Yeah, I know, Nancy. I actually spoke to somebody else and they said, what piece was this piece? Because it's the same. It seems like it's the same piece. So I know it can be confusing. So I think on the cutouts for the pattern pieces, I did put the dimensions. So if you use those cutouts, you'll know which piece is which. But I need to figure out a way of naming them. I tried to name them so that they were intuitive and it made sense, but I realized it doesn't. After looking at it and people asking questions, I realized it doesn't. So I'll take a look and I'll go back and see if I can find something a little bit more intuitive. So there's a perpendicular line that I'm going to draw left to right. So I drew a horizontal line that was centered and a vertical line that's centered. So they're both centered on my center mark. So I actually forgot to put that in the direction, so I will correct that, but it's actually in the center. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our plate that we have. So that's this little plate here. And we're going to lay it on that line so that it's centered. So the interesting thing about this plate is it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 holes in it. And I don't know if you could see that. So it has 6 holes. The center point is actually on that metal piece that's right between the 3 holes. So that's really where you want to put the crosshairs on that line. And then once you get that on there, you want to make sure that the prongs are going to line up with one of those holes. So when I do that, I can see that the prongs will line up on the next to last hole on the right and the next to last hole on the left. So I draw another line. So I skip from either side. And let's see if I can zoom in here so that you can see it a little bit better. So what I'm doing is I'm actually skipping this last box here and drawing a line. And then on the left-hand side, I'm doing the same thing. So it'll be one in from the last box, and that will be my line. So these two lines will be where my prongs will go. You need your Decoville. So I'm actually going to put this on. I'm actually looking to see if I have glue. You're then you put this on here, and once it's centered on here, you can fuse this down. But you can actually still also see the lines through there. So I'm just going to draw the little lines, and you're going to fuse it down. Make sure that it's the shiny side down when you fuse it down. I'm not going to iron mine on. I'm just going to put it in there, and I'm going to put duct tape over it to make sure it stays. But you should fuse it down. If you're using vinyl or leather, if you put a duct tape, it should be fine. So it's not really 3 inches because it's not 6 inches tall, Nancy. So that's why I said it should be centered. So when I wrote draw a perpendicular line to the center line, 3 inches down from the top. If you draw it 3 inches down to the top from the top, it's too far down. So I have to correct that. Right? Because 3 inches is here and it's all the way at the bottom. It should be further towards the top. So it's really 3 inches up or on center. So when I look at the actual prototype, it's on center. Because other than that, it's too low down. So I will post that to the group as well. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our scissors and we're going to snip those lines. So I'm showing you with the Decoville. I'm just folding it in half like this. Mine isn't attached, but you're going to snip like that and like that so that you have openings. On your fabric, if the Decoville is attached, you do the same thing. You just fold it in half like that, and you snip and you snip. Now make little snips. Don't make it too big because you can always make bigger slits. But if you make it too big, you can't make them smaller. All right. I leave all of the protective pieces on here so it has a clear plastic as long as I can. So I'm going to leave that on. I turn this over to the front. I'm going to look for my hole and I'm going to stick the prongs through my hole. This should actually go through both your Decoville or leather or vinyl, whatever you're using, but you should have that on there as well. So like I said, I'm not going to adhere mine down, but you should definitely do yours. So now that's on there. So next what you're going to do is take your little metal plate, and I try to make sure it's a little bit sharp on one side. So it's a little sharp on this side. So you can either put it down against the Decoville or you can put it up. I put it down towards the Decoville. And then what we're going to do is we're going to bend these prongs in. When you bend them in, make sure that you bend from the very base of the prong. So make sure you bend them in from all the way down here. And I'm just going to push mine in all the way from the bottom. If you come too high, it's hard to get it flat, and you'll have to take like a hammer or something. And because this is a flip lock, you'd have to hang it off the side of the table to get it down. So just do it this way and then just fold it in. You should be able to finger fold. If you can't finger fold, you can definitely use the side of flip this down and then use the side of, a scissor. You can push it down this way, or you can use a screwdriver, but push it down. If you need to, for whatever reason, hammer it, get something, a piece of wood or whatever, hang your lock over the side like that. It won't go completely over. and then you can hammer this down if you need to. I know some people actually have a block with a hole in it. So, you know, if I would have one of these and maybe stick it in one of those cubbies, I could then hammer it as well. But don't hammer it from the front, whatever you do. Okay. Yeah, it'll be centered and it'll be fine, Nancy. All right, so now that's on there. And I'm going to cover mine with a piece of duct tape, or actually Gorilla tape. And that's why I didn't worry too much about fusing it down. So I'm just going to cover this right up. Okay, so you put the 4 small rivets in the corner of the center. Yeah, I thought that was a good idea, but I know some people don't have rivets. So either or. You know, you don't know how somebody's going to use the bag, and the rivets, if you have them, actually are a good solution. Just make sure, I would recommend, I know you already put them in, but reinforce them. So put Decovil light on either side if somebody already hasn't done that, just to help reinforce them as well. So it's another layer. So now once we've done this and we have our twist lock in, the next thing we want to do is we want to put the other pieces together. So we're going to put together this bottom pocket. So we're going to retrieve our zipper. So this is our zipper, and we're going to make sure that we mark the center of this. So I'm just going to, I have the center here marked. I want to mark the center of this as well. So I fold it in half. Make sure you're folding the zipper in half. Don't fold these ends. Make sure you actually feel for the zipper, and it's the zipper piece that you're folding in half, because one end may be longer than the other. And then I'm going to just make a little mark on the wrong side of the zippers. Okay. All right. So once you've done that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the zipper like this. So I'm attaching the zipper so that it's on the left-hand side. And I'll show you why. All of my zippers will open the same way. So this opens on this side, the left-hand side. This opens, the top piece opens on the left-hand side, and that center pocket opens as well on the left-hand side. So look at your zipper. If you did your center and your zipper, we haven't really installed this, but we're going to come back and I'm going to mention that again. If you want this to open from the opposite side, because maybe the person that you're giving it to is left-handed, then put your zipper so that when it opens to the left and not the right. Right, so closed for all of my zippers are to the left. So I will be installing my zippers with it to the left. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a piece of double-sided tape. You can clip this in place. I'm going to use double-sided tape, and I'm just going to put a piece on either my zipper, or you could actually put it on the fabric. I'm going to put it on the zipper, but you can put it on the fabric as well. So now I have that on there. I'm just closing that zipper to get that bubble out of there. There's like a little bubble in here. All right. I'm going to peel off the backing. It doesn't really matter because this is centered. It doesn't matter which way it is. You just need it to be wider than it is taller. I'm then going to flip this over. So I'm just going to flip it over this way. And I'm going to align my center here with the center of my zipper that I marked. So I actually marked my zipper on the back, but there's a center mark here. So I'm going to align that zipper with that center mark. So I know that my zipper is centered. And then I'm going to press down. If you're using clips, you can put the clips in there instead. Or pins, you can put them in. All right. So there will only be a little bit of the zipper showing, this piece showing when we're done, but at least it'll be finished. It'll look finished. So now I'm going to stitch across this. I'm going to base stitch across this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. So I'm just looking at this just to make sure it's right. And of course it's upside down. So I'm going to just take this off because I want my zipper over here on the left. That I do know. And I'm going to flip it so that the bottom lines up with this. And the way that I know that, I'll show you how I know, because this is meant to be the front of the pocket. So I'm aligning it to the bottom. When I flip it this way, my zipper will be on the left. So I had it on the top, which was incorrect. So that's why I flipped it down. So I always double check to make sure it's going to lay the way I want it to lay. So now with the pull to the left, I lay this on the bottom so that when I flip the bottom down, the pull will still be on the left. Okay. We're going to base stitch this in with 1/4 inch seam allowance. And then we're going to come back. And hopefully you guys can still hear me. Like I said, I turned off all the mics except for the one that you can see me on. To baste it in, you put it at a length. The longest sewing length, mine is a 6 on my machine. So I'm pushing mine to the 6. And then I'm just going to, at 1/8 inch, I'm just going to baste it in, which is just lightly sewing it on so that it doesn't shift when I do the other piece. I will backtack. And when you get to that zipper pull, which is mine is over here, if it's in the way, you can just open it up, move it out of the way. If you need to lift your presser foot, make sure that you leave the needle in the down position because you don't want this to shift. Okay, so then the next thing that we're going to do, is we're going to put the back. So when we do this and we flip it over like this, right? We also need a back piece on this side of the zipper as well, right? Because we want our pocket to be lined. So what we're going to do is we're going to put our zipper pocket with the fabric right side facing up. So the right side should be facing up. You're going to get the corresponding piece. You're going to once again mark the center. I fold mine in half and snip. If you wanted to use a marking tool and just right there, you know, where the center is, you may do that. I will add another piece of double-sided tape. You may clip this in place or pin it in place. And one thing I noticed about this, this is a different brand tape that I'm using that I had here. And it's, for some reason, if you don't get it quite right, it peels the paper. So now there's a thinner piece of paper to get off and it's harder. Okay. So with this right side up, we're going to line up the center of our lining. When you line up the center of the lining, you want to make sure that it's the wrong side of your lining facing up. So it's right side to right side, and you're lining up the center. You can add some clips if you'd like to hold this down. Because I added the tape, I don't need to add clips, but you can definitely add clips. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew this at 1/4 inch with a stitch length of 3. So this is permanently sewing it in. I'm going to move my zipper pull out of the way because it was right at the start. And backtack at the beginning and the end. We're going to fold, and I'll show you, we're going to fold this down like this. But we're not going to do anything with it just yet. Okay, so we're going to fold that down. The next thing we want to do is we want to add the back of our lining piece. So we're going to add that next. So I'm just going to clip this so it's out of the way. I want it to be on there. So you're going to have a piece that says pocket back. So we're going to retrieve that piece. And the pocket back should be longer than the front. So you can see it's actually longer. We're going to first take the lining piece. So we're going to put the exterior to the side for right now. We're going to lay the lining right side up on our cutting mat. I'm going to add a piece of double-sided tape along the top. I'm just going to mark a center line. I mean, it'll line up, but it's just a force of habit where I mark that center line. Okay, so it's right side up. Take your double-sided tape or clips after you're done. I'm just going to do this like this. Going to lay it down so that it's totally straight and centered. I'm going to take my zipper. I'm going to line it up so it should be where the center mark is. So I'm going to transfer my mark from the back to the front so I can see it. And I'm going to press down. Just turning it over, making sure that it's totally straight. That zipper pull, I will be moving it as I go, so I'll have to make sure that I actually line that up correctly with the zipper pull. Because it has a little, it makes a little bump where the zipper pull is, so I just make sure. We're going to stitch this down using 1/8 inch seam allowance again, so we're going to base stitch it down using the longest stitch length. So I'm going to try to show you this. On this corner where the pull is, there's a little peak that happens here. So yes, so Nancy, I laid my lining right side down, right side up, I mean, and I put the tape at the top of the right side. You can put this wrong side down like this and then do it the reverse. But what should happen is the right sides of your lining should face each other. So that's really what we want. The right sides facing each other. So that little bump that I was telling you about that's here, if you move the zipper out of the way, it flattens the zipper. So I'll have to do, when I sew it, I'll make sure that I totally smooth it so that the zipper doesn't become wavy. But you should have the right sides of your lining together. Yes, it will be longer. That's totally fine. I just wanted to give you, I don't want to give you too many things. I prefer for you to trim something than to have you cut 50 different pieces at 50 different sizes. So yes, it's longer, but there's a reason. Okay. So now what happens is we're going to take this to the sewing machine. I'm going to move the zipper out of the way because remember I said it creates that high spot where it's adhered to the lining. So I want it to be totally straight. Changing my stitch length to the longest length. And I'm going to stitch this at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Just to baste it in. And I will back tack. When you get to the zipper pull, just move it back out of the way. I did use short zipper pulls that you can grab, but they're not too long because I didn't want the pulls to get in the way while you were sewing. There are some that are very long, that are longer, so I want them to get in the way. Okay. So now that we've done that, right, so now that we've added that on to our piece, we will have the right sides facing the right side. So the lining should be facing. Yes, it is too long. Like I said, I would have had to have you cut 4 different pieces, right? So the 2 are the same length, but what happens is this length here would have been another cut, and then the piece that we're going to fold over would have been another cut. So I'm trying to make the cuts easy and then just trim it later on, which to me makes it easier than giving you a lot of cuts. Because if I give you too many cuts in the pattern, it's easy to make a mistake. All right. So now what we're going to do is we will get the other piece. So this is the piece that matches the same length as the lining. And we're going to, with our piece right side up, right side up, we're going to take this piece and we're going to put it on right side down or wrong side up with the interfacing facing us. And we're going to line it to the top right here, to the zipper. So I'm going to take a piece of tape and put that on here as well. So once again, you can clip this on. I'm using tape. Some people use glue sticks. Some people use dabs of beacon glue. I should have just said fabric glue instead of a brand name, but fabric, glue. And we're going to just peel that off. Okay. So right side down, mark your center. Match it with your center line there. If you did it right, the edges, if you cut it perfect, the edges, or close to perfect. If you cut it correctly, the edges should align, but so we're going to lay that on there like that. Matching the zipper end. So we're making that zipper sandwich that we talked about. We've been talking about for a while, and we say we're going to make a zipper sandwich, and that's where the zipper is inside between 2 pieces of material. In this case, it's between our cotton fabric and our waterproof canvas. So when I snipped it, I could see it wasn't lined up. So that's what I'm doing. I'm aligning the pieces to make sure that it's centered. All right. And then once you've done that, you're going to take it to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch it at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance using the stitch length of 3. And my tape is not cooperating. All right. So I am going to add a little clip over here on the side. And the reason I'm adding that is because it has, it doesn't have tape on it. So I want to make sure it doesn't shift on me. All right. So let's go to the sewing machine. So you should have your fabric, your zipper, and then on the opposite side, you should have your lining. So we've made a little sandwich. And you'll see these two are the same length, and that's on purpose. For right now, we're gonna trim them. 1/4 of an inch seam allowance with a stitch length of 3. Remember to back tack at the beginning and the end. Pull that zipper pull out of the way. So my pull is actually at the beginning, so I'm just going to move it out of the way temporarily. For those of you who this is the first video, my 1/4 of an inch is the edge of my presser foot. So that's how I know where it is. You can use measure it on your sewing. So it depends on the presser foot, but this particular presser foot, that is my 1/4 of an inch mark. I back tacked, and then I'm going to move the pull out of the way. Once again, if you have to lift that, if you have to move the pull and you have to lift the presser foot, make sure that your needle is in the down position. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take our back piece, this back piece that we have, and we're going to fold it over our zipper. So when you fold it over the zipper, what you should have is you should have like a little lip. So it makes like a little tiny border. And you should see that this piece is a little bit longer than the front, but I gave you plenty of to work with. So what you're going to have, it makes a little border. So I have you fold it over here. I have you fold it over about 1/2 an inch. And really what it does is you line up the bottom here with that. And when you push down, it's about 1/2 an inch. So if your bottoms are lined up down here, it's about 1/2 an inch at the top. And that's how I get that little border at the top. So that's why the back was cut longer than the front. Okay. If it makes it easier for you, you can flip the piece that you just did out of the way. Make sure you line up the bottoms. And you can actually cut off that extra piece of waterproof canvas or cotton, depending on what fabric you're using. Then you can flip it and line up the bottoms again. So if I line these bottoms up just like this and put a clip in it, and I push it a little bit because the waterproof canvas has a way of trying to pull it up. But then if you do that and then you press this flat, you'll see you get that nice. It's about 1/2 an inch at the top. Makes sense, right? So once we have that in place, there's a couple of things we're going to need to do. So the first thing we're going to need to do before we do anything else is we want to, because when we open up this pocket, if we put our hand down, the pocket, when we sew it at the bottom, will go all the way to the bottom of the bag. That's not a bad thing, right? You know, having a pocket, and this is the actual bag, having a pocket when you open it and it goes all the way down to the bottom, down here, isn't a bad thing, right? What I want to do is I don't want it to go all the way to the bottom, so I'm actually going to stitch a little bit so it's not all the way to the bottom. So I have you stitch it like right here. So even though it feels like it does, there's like a gap in here. And the reason I also do that is because I want to cut out some of the waterproof canvas in here so it's not in your lining, so it's not too thick. I don't want the thickness on your machine for those of you who may have challenges as far as it being too much in there. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to have you open this up. And I'm going to have you stitch a line before I top stitch. The directions have you top stitch, but I'll have you do this first. And what you're going to do is you're going to clip this together. So clip the sides of your waterproof canvas together like this so that they're even. And then we're going to draw a line on the bottom. So we're going to draw a line up from the bottom edge. So it's only the two pieces that you should have together. You shouldn't have any of your fabric pieces. And then we'll do the top stitching. Before you do that, I'm sorry. Before you do that, we won't do that first. I'll tell you why, because we have to lay this flat first. Close your zipper. We're going to do the top stitching on this side of the zipper and that side. And then we'll do the line. If I stitch it now, I won't be able to top stitch it. So clip your bottom and its corresponding lining together for the top stitch. Just like this. So clip those together and then clip this top piece and the corresponding lining piece together. And I know one is this piece is longer than your lining, but we want to clip them or pin them together. I mentioned yesterday that it's hard to pin waterproof canvas, but if you have sharp pins, you should be able to do that. And we're going to do a row of top stitching on the left and the right of the zipper. And we're going to do it on the exterior fabric. It will be a stitch length of 4 or 4.5, and it will be at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. So I'll do them both at the sewing machine at the same time. So I'll just go once to the sewing machine. My 1/8 of an inch is the inside of my presser foot. So my 1/8 of an inch is in here, right on the inside next to the needle is my 1/8 of an inch. Remember to lengthen that stitch length. I do back tack at the beginning and the end. If you need to move that zipper pull out of the way, you can do that. So that's one side, and then I'm going to do the same to the opposite side on the exterior fabric. I'm just going to top stitch. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to take out our clips or our pins. You can drop your lining fabric down now, and you can make that fold that we had before. So everything now should line up at the bottom, right? So if I take my lining fabric and I pull it down, it should line up with my bottom piece. If you've trimmed it. If you haven't trimmed it, then just pull it down till it meets up and then you can trim it. I trimmed mine off the excess, so now I'm going to clip it. So now what I need to do is draw a line. Draw a line from the bottom. So this is the front, this is the bottom, this is the top, the back of my pocket. And I'm just going to draw a line that I'm going to need to sew on the bottom of this, of the lining. So what I'm doing is I'm only sewing on the lining pieces. So the lining pieces should be right sides together. And I've moved my exterior pieces out of the way, completely out of the way. The top, why not just top stitch the exterior and not the lining? You can do that as well, Nancy. You can top stitch. So what Nancy's saying is instead of top stitching both of these pieces together, to just top stitch this exterior and not the lining. It just made it easy to tell you to lay it flat. That's all. I think on the in the directions. I may have had you do that, but it just made it easy for me to demo, to tell you to just lay it flat. So there were 2 pieces on this side and 2 pieces on that side. But absolutely, you can do one and not the other. So in other words, you could not have lining here, top stitch it, then move these 2 lining pieces to the other side, or actually one of the lining pieces to the other side, and then top stitch the lining and this together. I hope that makes sense. So I just want to make sure these are together. And then I'm trying to make sure it's lying straight and flat and everything good. And then I'm going to draw that line across the bottom. So I do want to cut, I will be cutting off some more on the bottom because I want to cut this extra at the bottom out. So when I'm sewing it to the seam, I don't have 2 pieces of extra fabric in there. So I'm just going to draw my line. So I know where to sew. And I'm going to sew on the line that I drew. So I don't know if you can see it, this line here. I'm going to sew at that, on that, at the 3, a stitch length of 3. I really try to cut as much bulk out of the bag as possible, out of the lining as possible. I do try to cut that bulk out of there. And so now what's going to happen is I'm going to cut 1 to 1/4 of an inch of the line. So I'm going to make sure that I cut, I want to still leave some in there, but I'm going to just cut 1/4 of an inch. I'm going to cut most of it off and leave about 1/4 of an inch on the actual bottom. So I'm going to, where the stitch line is, 1/4 of an inch. All right, so you can see, hopefully you can see, there's a stitch line there, and I left about 1/4 of an inch. So it's going to be shorter than my front. But what that does is it stops and hopefully you can still hear me. For some reason it said my mic was muted. What it does, it stops when you stick your hand in there. You can't get your hand all the way out the bottom. It stops it, and things only go that far. All right. So now I'm going to fold this over like this, matching up. Now I'm just matching up. It's not all the pieces, it's my bottom pieces, and match up your side pieces. So match up the sides as well. Just like that. Fold this flat. Okay. And once you fold it flat, right here, I top stitched at the zipper, top and bottom, and then I'm going to top stitch up here as well. Right. So I'm going to put a little top stitching right there as well at 1/8 of an inch. And it just makes it look neater. You don't have to, but it makes it look neater to top stitch it. So I'm going to use 1/8 of an inch and a stitch length of 4, between 4 and 5, 4 and 4.5. And when I get to the other side, I'm just going to pivot. Hopefully you guys can hear me. And I'm going to just stitch down these sides, and that's just so that when it comes to at 1/8 of an inch, that's just because when it comes time I don't lose anything. So it just locks it in on the sides. So it's just 1/8 of an inch, keeping it out of the seam allowance just to hold it in place. And I'm not using a basting stitch, I'm just using my regular stitch to make it happen. All right. Thank you, Nancy. So I just used I just seal this up because I don't like losing pieces. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to cut this so that it's flush, right? So I'm going to cut off that extra that I need, that I have. Okay. So the next thing you're going to do is we have the pocket. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to get our front pieces. So those are the pieces that we had where we had 2 different sides and then we had a middle piece. So let me get my middle piece, which is this piece, right? So I'm going to do mine this way, right? You're going to take the piece that we just did. You're going to lay it on top of the middle piece like that. So that the bottoms line up, just like that. And then we're going to, again, I'm going to base this down onto there at 1/8 of an inch. When I come back, I'm going to attach my side pieces. So I'm just going to base that down at 1/8 of an inch on both sides just to hold it in place. So basting it, it should be a stitch length of 6 or whatever your longest stitch length is on your machine. I'm sorry, I'm just going to cut, I have a little bit of, I didn't cut this straight, overage over here. Just going to cut that off. Okay. So now that we have that basted in, I'll show you. So I have these pieces basted together. So this is attached here. All right. Double check to make sure. In mine I can see it's the same distance down. So it's straight. I'm going to line up my pieces that I had for the sides. And like I said, don't go crazy about this, but I'm going to line my pieces up, and it's hard to see because a piece of it's hidden under here, but I want to try to make a complete picture, right? So this piece was for here, and this piece was the purple was here for my pieces. So I can see this makes a complete picture up there. So now I'm going to take one of my pieces and I'm going to take the right-hand side. I'm going to keep the main centerpiece right side up, take the piece that's right side up and flip it over so that the fabric is right sides together. So I'm laying this piece on top of the centerpiece. And I will clip the sides. So I match up all my edges and I will clip them. And this is where Nancy had mentioned yesterday in the other video, part 2, that you could have just interfaced or just sewn everything together without the interface and then interface at the end. But I'm trying to keep the interfacing out of the seam allowance. So that's why I did this. So we're going to stitch this down at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance on that side using a stitch length of 3. Take your time off of going across the zipper piece because it is a high piece. So just take your time. You may have to hand crank. I don't know if you heard my machine, but it sort of got stuck there. Okay. So I have that piece now stitched down. It's stitched in there. I will be folding it over this way. And I will be top stitching. But before I do that, I'm going to take my other piece of material, move your zipper pull out of the way. So it's going to be your left side. You're going to flip it on top of your zipper, the part with the center. You're going to clip those as well together on that long edge. And we're going to stitch that the same way we did the right hand side. Okay. So stitch length of 3 at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Take your time going over that zipper. Also, make sure this pull is out of the way. If it's over there, move it out of the way. You don't want it, you don't want to get underneath your zipper foot. Okay. So now I have my piece completed. So what I will show you is that and I did get a question about this earlier. If you look at this piece and one of your other pieces from your backing, these two pieces should now be the same size, right? So this is going to be my back piece. These two should be the same size. So when you cut them, this was a little bit bigger, and I only had you cut one of these and 3 of these other pieces. But when you stitch it together, they will be the same size. So now what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch. And you can see how you can kind of sort of see a motif up here. We're going to top stitch this at 1/8 inch seam allowance on both sides to lock this down, and it'll be decorative. So it's 1/8 inch with a 4 or 4.5 inch, a 4 or 4.5 stitch length. And once again, take your time going over that zipper. And this is where I actually hand crank it sometimes. And it's just that it's very thick. I have zipper teeth, I think, in there. And I'm just going to hand crank this because I think what happened for me here is I'm going to have to take it out. I bent my needle. I could feel it. It's bent. So I'm just going to cut this and replace my needle real quick. I can hear it in there. So these things happen. So I'll just tighten everything up while I'm over here. And thread my needle. So this is like Murphy's Law. It's either the bobbin or the needle. Okay. So let's do this again. I'm going to stitch. I'm just going to cut some threads here. And I'm going to stitch. Of course, hopefully I won't bend my needle again. The other thing is, remembering as you sew to change your needle, because over time it does get dull. So, which is also, I know some people who change it for every project. I don't do that, but changing it to make sure that you have a sharp needle is always good. So I'm going to stitch on the other side as well. Take taking my time. If you have to hand crank, so this is just turning your wheel to get through those parts, you can do that as well. But that is thick because it does have, you know, waterproof canvas in there. All right. So we made it happen. A little setback, but we made it happen. So now what we're going to do, which is what I mentioned, is that we should have this piece when you're done top stitching and putting it together. It should measure the same as your last remaining piece, and your last remaining piece here is your back. So these two should measure the same. If you have to trim it a little bit, you can trim it, but it should be really the same size. Okay. Make sure if you're trimming your piece that you have it on center. So make sure that you're lining up the center of your piece and you're not trying to just cut off one side without compensating it on the other side to make sure that it is totally center. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to cut the little corners off of here while we have it. And I'm just going to, for myself, I'm a little bit off on one side. I'm going to, I could see it. I was looking at it and saying it's a little bit off. And it is on one side because it was on center. See? I don't know how I did that, but it's off. And like I said, it is on center because I have my marks down here. So it's actually this size. It's a little bit off. So we're going to cut that off. I'm going to, you know, you'd square it up, make sure that it's correct. I don't know why it's at an angle, but it is what it is. So now it's even. Yep. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we're going to cut the corner off. And that was where we made the little boxes down here. And we're going to cut those off so that we don't forget. So I made a little box. Just like this. I drew a diagonal line. So I'm drawing it from the upper right to the lower left. Just like that. So I'm connecting those lines. And I could tell you to just draw a line here and a line here. But seeing the box for somebody who's a beginner actually helps. And then we're going to do the same on the other side. So we're going to draw a 1-inch box. And then we're going to draw a diagonal line. Okay. Just going to double check my corner over here. Just to make sure it's the same. Yep. And then you would get your scissors, or you could use your rotary cutter as well. And we're just going to cut that line. Yes, there will be a little piece of Decoville light in there. It shouldn't be a big deal. But once again, I tried to make it easy. So instead of telling you to cut the corner and then adhering it, all of that just makes it easier. All right. So now that we've done that, the next thing that we're going to do is I think we do the strap next. I mean, the flap next. I just want to make sure. Yep. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to take the piece that goes up here for the flap. Now, when we're making the flap, we don't want the flap. We're not going to sew the top of the flap. We're just going to sew down the sides and across the bottom. We need to cut our boxes again for our corners on the flap as well. So just to show you what's happening here. We're going to do on the lining and this piece. So I'm going to turn this over to the wrong side. I'm going to draw a little box once again at the corners. So you can decide, because you're going to see the flap. So do you want that to be like that? You can decide. It doesn't matter. It should be wider than it is longer or taller. So it should be wider this way than it is taller. We're going to draw a little box in both of our corners. And it's only at the bottom corners. We're not drawing it on all the corners. And then we're going to draw that diagonal line this way, and we're going to cut it. So I'm just going to use my rotary cutter to do that. Okay. So that's one piece with the corners cut out. You can see it better this way. And then we're going to cut this piece, the other piece as well. So this is the lining piece. We're going to cut diagonal line or diagonal corner. And it's just a 45-degree angle. That's all I'm cutting. I just double check that it's right thing that I'm cutting. Okay. So now we have these two pieces that we cut the corners out of. And we're just going to simply put these right side together. So there's nothing fancy. It's just waterproof canvas is right side up. The exterior of the pot flap is right side down. So they're right sides together. And we're going to match up the edges. Remember, we're not sewing that top piece. We're just sewing the three sides. So we're going to leave this side open, completely open. We're just going to sew down, across the diagonal, across the bottom, back up the diagonal, and up the side. So we're just going to do that at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And a stitch length of 3. Okay. When you get to about a 1/4 inch from the corner, lift your presser foot with the needle down and then pivot 45 degrees and sew to the other corner. Do the same thing to stitch across the bottom. So you're going to pivot. Make sure you leave that needle in the down position. And I do back stitch at the top and the bottom, or at the start and the end. Okay. So I have that completed. All right. So it's sewn. Remember I said leave this open at the top. What I also do is I cut at an angle here, just to make it, to get it to be a little bit pointier. I cut at an angle like that next to the stitching. I don't cut on the stitches, but I cut maybe about 1/8, a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch on those corners. And then what I will also do is I will cut maybe about 1/8 of an inch off of all of the seams. So I just cut it, I cut it basically in half of all the seams. And it just helps it lie flatter. You don't have to do this. It's just something that I do. And since we're on live, I figured I would tell you. All right, so I cut those all off. So now what we're going to do is we're going to turn this right side out. Because you left that opening at the top, it should be pretty easy. So I stick my thumb in here, grab this corner, and then push. That's all I do. So I'm going to do that for both of the corners. Once you get one, it should be easier to get the other one, right? You should be able to push that down without any issues. Once again, you can use a blow dryer. You could hit it with some steam. Don't hit it with steam with your hand in there, but hit it with some steam to make that waterproof canvas a little bit more pliable. And then I just poke it out. You can use a crochet hook if you want to slide it back and forth in there for your seams. You can use a crochet hook to do that. You can use a pointy thing. You can use, the edge of a a chopstick. So this is like a turning tool, so I could stick that in there. I just use my fingertips. Just make sure it's not something sharp and that you don't push too hard and rip those stitches that are in there. But I just use my fingertips to do it. But if you want, you can do that. And then what I do is I sort of roll back and forth between my fingers just to get it to be pointy. Now they will be rounded. They will be slightly rounded, so they're not going to be perfectly um, sharp corners. They will be rounded. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually take this piece and we're going to lay it over here. And when you stitch it, it should sit right to the left and the right of your top stitching. So where the fold is, it should snug up right in there. It may be an eighth of an inch off depending on how you stitch, but it should be right in there. And you can see that the flap now will align with this. Okay. So what we want to do is before we put the flap down, I don't know why I have glue on this side. I don't know why, but for some reason I have glue on this side. But what we're going to do is we're going to top stitch around here at 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. When you get to this corner, you just simply have to pivot. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you want it, some people, it's easier for them to sew down and sew around. Hi, Cheryl. So glad you made it again. So we're going to top stitch around the edges here. So let's go to the sewing machine and do that. Your top stitching, don't forget, is at a 4, between a 4 and 4.5. Try to be consistent. So whatever you pick, stick with that. Okay. So it's an 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to set it to a 4 and I'm just going to sew around. When you get to the corner, once again, leave your needle in down position, lift and pivot. Now mine is a little bit over an 1/8 of an inch. So what I'm going to do is turn my stitch length down to a lower number. So I'm going to put it maybe like a 2. I'm going to take that half a stitch and then I'm going to turn it back up to a 4 and then I'm going to pivot and I should be right on target. So you can turn it down to take a smaller stitch if you need to. And to make sure that it, you get it as, or you could have just done it, in a curve. You could have just curved around the curves. And back tack at the beginning of the end. Okay. Don't I have autocorrect? Autocorrect can either be your friend or your enemy. So now that we've done that, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to attach the flap to this. So when we attach it, and we're going to need that other piece, the other piece that goes on here. And I give you a measurement to measure up on either side. So I'll show you that as well. But we're going to need this piece, the other piece, because we're going to rough fit it to make sure So you can hear me now. I lost connection for a second, but hopefully you can hear me now. Okay. Once you make the marks on both sides, you're going to take your flap. And the way that we install the flap is that we're going to install the flap upside down. So we're going to have the wrong side facing up and the edges on that mark, right? So the way that we're going to rough fit this is we're going to take the flap, we're going to line the edge right there where that is, where those marks are, and we're going to flip it down. So here goes where the rough fit goes in. I'm going to take off, and in this case, you have to take off the plastic. You don't really have to do much. Take off the plastic, stick your piece on here with this rough fitting here, lay it down, and it should be right there. It should be on that. You should see your flap there. So really what's going to happen is when I stitch it down, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if I fold it down, it should lay about a 1/4 inch, which should be where that flap is. That's how I did it. So I can see where it is. Right? If you want to make it easier on yourself, something else you can do, draw a line at a 1/4 inch because that's going to be your seam allowance. And I lost my little ruler. Make sure the line that you draw is with a it's not permanent, your pen. And a 1/4 inch is a little bit. Well, there's going to be some pushing as well. So that's my 1/4 inch line right here, right? If I line that up with that, you'll see that it lines up with the flap. So my marking is right here. So that's going to be my 1/4 inch. So this is a 1/4 inch higher. It's a 1/4 inch higher. And that's so when I put this on, this will definitely meet. It'll be like that. I don't know if you can see. I'll zoom in. Let's see if it'll let me zoom in, how much I can zoom in. Okay. So what I'm saying, what I did was I had you put 2 marks here. You're going to stitch it and you're going to fold it back, but you're going to lose a 1/4 inch because of the seam allowance, which means that the flap will be right there. So there's a little bit of a gap. That little bit of a gap should be what makes it match in here. So that's why I said you can rough fit it to make sure. I'm not attaching this yet. I attached it at the end because I don't want it to get scratched up. So I'm just going to put this back in here. But you'll see what I mean. So put that back in there. I made a mark. I'm going to put a piece of thin. So I'm going to put a piece of 1/8 thin double-sided tape on here to hold it down. It may be difficult for you to pin it, but you can try pinning it in place. But I'm putting tape on there, and then what I'm going to do, it's going to go on, it's going to look odd because it's wrong side that you're going to stitch. So it's going to be wrong side up and upside down. Is really what's happening. So I take this, I turn it upside down on my marks that I told you to make in the pattern. Just like that. So it's totally upside down, right? I'm going to stitch this at 1/4 inch, which is what seals the top, right? It seals the top. And then we'll come back and I'll show you. Believe me, it'll make sense. So change your stitch length to a 3 and stitch across. I do back tack at the beginning of the end. And like I said, you should see it. It's hard to see, but mine sits right snug against that. It may be 1/8 inch. So if it's 1/8 inch off, just make sure it's centered on your piece. Okay, but now it's attached. You can see that. So I will show you what it looks like. Okay. So I stitched it on here, but that was 1/4 inch and these were the 2 lines. So there is going to be a gap so that you don't see that raw edge. And I'm just going to rough fit it again. So I always check and double check. I'm going to take this and I'm going to fold it down. I'm going to take my piece that I have. I'm going to stick this on here. So I stick it on the actual flap. And I can see when I put this on, it's going to match. So I have to push down on it. You're definitely going to have to push down because over time it's going to push down anyway. So make sure when you have that 1/4 inch that you push this down as hard as you can for the top stitching, right? But you'll see that it actually fits. If you want to, and you don't want it that high up, you can always lower this a little bit lower down and you can stitch across if you would like. You could stitch across with it low with not a bigger gap. What'll happen is your flap will then have a little buckle or bend in it. So there'll be a little bit of give in there. So if you know that you're going to stick something in here and you want a little bit more give than it currently has. So let me show you what it looks like on the finished bag, just so that you can understand what I did. So when I put the flap on, this is the finished bag, right? You don't see the seam because I actually stitched it under there. But if you want to lower it, you can. And if I were to lower it, then what would happen is I would have like a little bit of bend like that. I don't know if you can see it. So it's not lying totally flat. But I wanted it to lie totally flat. I have an ID that I'm going to stick in there. So then, you know, there's still room in here, even with that. So if you put something in there, it'll still go. Okay. So now that I know that that fits, I'm going to take my flap and I'm going to cut off about 1/8 of an inch. You just need to cut off enough that when you push this down, and you should be pushing it down towards the flip, when you push it down, it actually, you actually don't see this because we're going to stitch it again at 1/4 inch. So you don't want to see it. So we're going to have to cut about 1/8 of an inch. Sometimes if it's, you want to just do 1/16 of an inch, it's fine. But we have to cut off enough that we don't see it when we seal it up. Don't cut off too much, but cut off enough that you don't see it. So it gets encased in there. My problem is I used tape, so the tape made the piece stick down, but you can see I lifted it up, but it was sticking down there. So now I have the whole thing. And I couldn't do it because the tape was holding it down. And the reason that I used 1/8 of an inch tape instead of 1/4 inch tape is because when you do this, you don't want to see any tape residue. So you may, if you use 1/4 inch, you may want to just make sure you peel off any extra. So now I cut that, cut off enough, hopefully, so that when I do this, I don't see it. So now when I fold this down, and like I said, make sure you push this down really tight towards that zipper. And then we're going to stitch again with a stitch length of 3 across here at 1/4 inch. And I do back tack at the front, at the start and the stop, because you will be lifting that up. Like I said, make sure that you pull it tight against these stitches so it's really tight in here. Okay. And what I'm going to show you is that there will be a gap. So there should be a gap because there's going to be, when you put the lock on, you'll see that little gap as well. So it'll take up that gap. Text start not to cooperate with me tonight. Okay, so you can see that I stitched at 1/4 inch there, and then you'll see, I'm just trying to hold this, there's a little bit of a gap in there between the lock. But when I put this on, right, if I were to put this here and here, I'll try to show you, it will fit like that. Okay, So make sure you push this tight. Like I said, if you wanted to and you wanted to leave a little bit more, what you could do is lower this about an eighth of an inch down or so if you want to create a little bit of a buckle in there. And then what happens is, sorry, I just want to put this away. You can see on the other side that I encased the seam. So there is no, you don't see that other piece that I did, which is why I had you cut it shorter. All right. So now we've finished the front. We're in the home stretch. We are in the home stretch. So the next thing that we're going to do is put this all together. So we should have our front. We should have our back. We should have the centerpiece we did yesterday. We should also have the top zipper piece, and we should have our strap. So we're getting ready to put it all together now, okay? So we will be making a burrito like we did last night. And this one may be a little bit more challenging, but we're going to get it done, I promise. So what we're going to do is we're going to take, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to take, let's take our front piece that we just created and our strap. And we're going to attach the O-ring to the upper left corner of our piece, right? So we want to attach it at the upper left-hand corner of our piece. Make sure when you lay your strap down that you have the wrong side of your strap facing up, right? Because what happens is when you put the strap on, that waterproof canvas should be against your shoulder. So make sure it's facing up. You're going to take your strap and you're going to place it, and it's about an inch in from that margin. So move it in about an inch. And the other thing you want to do is when you take the strap, you want about a quarter of an inch of this strapping hanging into the bag. So you're not going to put it right at the seam, right? We're not going to put it right here to the seam. We're actually going to raise it up a little bit so it's a quarter of an inch extended over. And that's just so it's not so easy to come out of the bag. Once we get this in there, if you would like, you may add a rivet. If you have a rivet, you can add a rivet to even secure it that way as well, to add extra. Okay, so I'm just going to clip this on both sides right there. We're going to go to the sewing machine, and we have to make sure, once again, make sure that your strap, this strap, is facing up, right? So the waterproof canvas should be facing up, and you should see the back end of your buckle, not the front. Because when we put it on, we want to make, this is going to flip over. So make sure that it's right side. And we're going to stitch that in at an eighth of an inch. So, you know, you can do a little bit more than an eighth, but don't do like a quarter because that's going to be our seam allowance. So make sure that this is extending over. And let's go to the sewing machine and do that. You're going to baste it in. I would recommend that you, you know, use that, maybe not at the biggest that you can, but somewhere in between. So I'm using a 5. My biggest is a 6, but I'm using a 5 only because I don't want it to be too floppy in there. And I back tack. So now it's in there. You see it's in there? So hopefully you'll be able to see that that's right in there. I don't know why it won't. It was not switching. So give me 1 second to get it over there so you guys can see it. Okay. So now you can see that that's been attached. Okay. After we attach that, the next thing that we need to attach, so there's a lot of attaching going on here. The next thing we're going to need to attach is our zipper, right? So our zipper piece. So we're going to put it right sides together, right side up to begin with. But then we're going to need to flip it over so that we can see the waterproof canvas side. So this side. We want to make sure it's centered, right, in the middle. So we have our center mark here, center mark there. When you do that, it should align with this piece, okay, on either side. So we're going to make sure it's centered in there. So it's right sides together. The other thing we want to make sure is just like on here, our zipper is opening to the right. So when we move this to the right, it opens. You want to make sure you do this so the zipper opens to the right as well. So they're both in the same direction. Okay. So we're going to clip that in place. And I'm just double checking my positioning here. We're going to clip this in place. It's right sides together. So you should see the right side of the front of your bag and the wrong side of your zipper that you did earlier. We did yesterday. And we're going to go back in here and we're going to stitch that also 1/8 of an inch. So I won't take you to the sewing machine. I will do it and then come back. Take your time going over it. Back tacking may be difficult, but take your time. Hand crank if you need to, and baste that in. And there we go. So now we have that piece in. So this is our flap. Just double check because this is a flap for the front. Zipper is going to open. Zipper is going to open. We have this in as well. Check your strap to make sure that it opens. So you should see the wrong side when it's totally smooth. You should see the waterproof canvas side and the back of your tri-glide. So we know that all the pieces are in there. Okay. The next thing that we're going to need to do is we need to add a back to our pocket like we normally do. So we're going to get our pocket pieces. So before we attach this, we're going to cut out those corner pieces that we need to attach, that we need to cut out. So that was these little angular pieces over here. We're going to cut those out. And you're going to do it on both pieces. So I'm just going to take a little shortcut here. I'm going to do them at the same time, but you would do them on both pieces. So both of those, you would make your little 1-inch square, and then you would cut a 45-degree angle cut or a diagonal cut. And I'm just going to do it on both pieces at the same time. Okay. So once you've done that, we only need one of these pieces for right now for the front. We're going to use the other one for the back. So we're going to take one piece. We're going to take our front where we have the zipper attached. Just to keep myself sane here a little bit, I'm going to put these together and I'm just going to try to clip it just to keep it all together. It's a little bit weighty. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this piece on top of that piece, matching up the centers. So if you need to, you can put a piece of double-sided tape, and that's what I'm going to do. It just helps it to stay. And this one's going to be a permanent seam, so we're going to stitch it at 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way across to attach it. And then what we'll have is we'll have our front done. So, because we'll have our lining, we'll have our pocket, we'll have everything. And then we're going to put this on just like that, matching up the top seam, the top edge, raw edge. Once again, you should have 1/4 inch. So this should be sticking out about 1/4 inch at the top. Once we've done this, I would recommend, not recommend, if once we've put it together, you can put a rivet in it, which is what I had mentioned earlier. If you want to make it stronger, I would recommend, if you're going to do that, like I said earlier, put a piece of Decoville light or heavy or something behind it to help to reinforce it. Because even though it has a rivet is just a bigger hole that something can rip out of. So back that hole with a piece of waterproof canvas or some scrap material that doesn't stretch, right? Because once you make the hole in here, it just makes it's just a big hole. It's just something bigger to rip. So reinforcing it helps it. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this zipper. I'm just going to open the zipper for myself because it's kind of a little, it's giving me some bulk in there. So I'm opening it up. And then that way it lies flatter. So we're going to stitch this at 1/4 inch seam allowance. Once again, remember this is bulky, so you want to take your time going over that. Grab a piece of fabric, or if you want, you can use, if you have one of those things called a hump jumper. And I think a lot of machines come with them now. But if you don't, you can always grab, I can never find mine, so I just usually grab a piece of fabric. And I'll show you what I mean. So I just take like a piece of fabric like this, and I just simply roll it up. So any piece of fabric, and I'm going to stick it behind my presser foot. Right, so I'm going to start sewing over here. And because I'm going to start sewing there, when I get to here, it's going to go up. It's going to try to go up. It'll go on my machine, but if your machine doesn't go, this is something that you can do. I'm going to back tack, so I'm going to turn my stitch length down to 3. I'm going to back tack. When I get close, you can see that the zipper foot, I'm sorry, is at an angle. It's going like this. I lift it with the needle in the down position. I take any scrap piece of fabric. What I'm doing is I'm leveling off. I'm actually leveling off that presser foot. So it's at the same height, and it makes it easier to go across. Mine would have gone, but if yours, this is just a tip. If you have problems going over something, you can put a scrap piece in there and it makes it easier. Okay. So now I'm going to do that. Hold on. I'm just trying to, my tape came off. Okay. And then I'm going to slowly go over it. The fabric will move away. So it'll fall off. It actually comes out. I'm going to back stitch just a little bit. And I'm going to go forward again. You can do the same thing at the front. Just be careful if you put it at the front. Keep it away from your needle and move it as you move. Right? So you're just going to catch the edge of that presser foot. And I'm just straightening this out. My tape lifted, so. And I will back tack at the end as well. Okay. So that was at 1/4 inch. And I have that on there. So now if I take this and I flip it this way, I could actually flip all the pieces and bend it in half. And we're going to top stitch, so that'll give an extra, layer of stitching over here. And I top stitch it at the end, only because at the end, I'm going to top stitch this piece here. I'm going to top stitch it down just like that. You can leave it up, but at the end, I'm going to top stitch. So I'm going to do top stitching at the very end. But now you can see that you have your oval ring attached. Your strap, just double check it. I keep saying this because you don't want to end up in its backwards. And you have the front done. So now your front piece is complete with this on it. So the next thing we have to do is we want to do the same thing for the back, right? So we need to attach this to the back of our bag. So we're going to sort of do this the same way. I just want to make sure that I'm not giving you guys the wrong directions in any way, fashion, or form. So what we're going to do is after that is we have to take this opposite end, right? So we're going to take this opposite end and we're going to attach it here. We're going to attach it to the back of the bag, and then we're going to attach the back of the bag to this. So I hope that makes sense. And I tend to clip things to keep them out of the way. Okay. So, just want to make sure I'm giving you the same series of steps that are in the directions. I'm not giving you different direction steps. Okay. So we're going to take our other piece, which is this piece, and we're going to take our back piece, which is this piece. So I'm going to lay my back piece down on the cutting mat, and I'm going to need to attach this to the back piece, but it has to be wrong side up, right? So this strap, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go in, we're going to make sure it's at least like 1/4 of an inch over, and we're going to clip it in place. So that's the other side of the strap. Just like that. Okay. We're going to baste that in, and you have it all attached. I actually have the other piece right here. We have it all attached. Just look at it and make sure it's straight. So don't make sure it's not twisted. If it's twisted, guys, and it's totally, you come in the strap, it's twisted, you don't have to rip this side out. What you can do is come back later and take this piece out, untwist it, and then restitch this piece. You know, the part that we did here. So you don't have to, you don't have to take it out. You can just take out where it's attached to the tri-glide and straighten out your strap. Okay. So now I'm going to stitch this at 1/8 of an inch to baste it in. When I come back, I'm going to take this and lay it here centered. So it should be centered the same way I did the other piece. I'm going to baste that in, right? So every right side up, wrong side up. And then I'm going to take the lining piece for the back, right side down, and I'm going to stitch that. So then I will have a complete front and back, and I just have to put the center piece in, right? So let's take this right now and just baste in this strap. So I'm just going to baste that in. It's long enough I don't even have to carry the rest of it over to the sewing machine. So I won't show you, it's just basting it in. It's not. Stitch length is the longest stitch length on your sewing machine. And you're going to stitch that in at 1/8 of an inch. And back tack at the beginning and the end. Okay. So now I have these pieces. It's hard to explain, but I have these pieces, right? Checking on my straps. Everything looks good. Make sure my piece that I have for my back is lying straight. Okay, so I've straightened everything out. And then what I'm going to do next is I'm going to put a piece of tape across here because I have to attach my zipper closure. And just straighten out that strap. If you have to clip that strap again so that it stays straight, this strap up here, so it stays straight so it doesn't go this way or the other way, you can clip it. Okay, so I just put a piece of tape. Absolutely. I can zoom out. And I will remove the sewing machine as well. Hopefully you can see that a little bit better, what I'm doing. Okay. And this piece was the front. So I haven't done that yet, but that I will be doing that. So hopefully that's better for you, Cheryl. All right. So once again, this has to be wrong side up. Check it against your front and make sure that when you pull it straight, your strap is totally straight. It should be totally straight. There should be no bend in it. We're then going to take our our zipper portion, and we're going to line up the center. So I'm just going to line up my center marks that I cut earlier, and we're going to match those raw edges together, just like that. And then I'm just going to clip it. Even though there's tape under there, I'm just going to clip it just like that. Okay. I'm going to base that in at 1/8 of an inch as well, using a stitch length of 6 on my machine, or whatever the longest stitch length is on your machine. So now I have all of these pieces together. There's nothing separate right now. They're all together. So I won't bring it. I'm just going to base this in real quick. And back tack at the beginning of the end. Make sure also that you straighten out that strap. So make sure that back strap is totally straight. And the strap that you have in the back, it should be easier to go over. The front one was kind of hard because it's thicker, but this one should be easier to go over. So now that's in, just to show you what it looks like. This is what it looks like, laying it flat, right? We haven't done the lining yet for this part, but you'll have your front. This is your strap, right? It should be straight. You can see mine is totally straight. Make sure your zippers are opening in the same direction. So this one's opening this way. This one's opening in the same direction. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we need to flip this over just like this, right? And we have a lining piece here, but we don't have one here. So we're going to attach the lining piece here. So I'm just going to fold that just like that. This is the front. This is the back. I'm going to attach, flip over so that you have the fabric side or the waterproof canvas side facing up. I'm going to attach and put some more double-sided tape on this. So I'm just going to get some of these threads. I'm going to attach this last piece that I have, which is the lining piece, centered, and put it right here. So I'm going to just put a piece of double-sided tape right there. And this is going to be a permanent seam. So this one's going to be stitched at 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And we're going to back tack at the beginning and at the end. So I made my center mark here. I can see them, and I'm just going to align my edges. Okay. You may want to add a clip up here where the strap is to make sure it's straight when you sew it in, so it doesn't get out of place. You don't have to, but you may want to do that. I always try to double check it anyway. And I'm just adding clips just because it's a lot of pieces and the tape isn't being as cooperative as I want it to be. It's a different one that I sent you guys in the box. And so that's the pieces. So now when we're done, we'll have everything here put together. Shouldn't the strap be on opposite sides? So I believe that they are. Hold on. Cheryl, you're absolutely right. I stitched it in on the wrong side. Good catch. Okay. So yes. So that's easy, easy, easy fix. So I stitch, what Cheryl's saying is I stitch these straps on the same side. So one, I'll flip it to the front. One strap should be on the front on the left, and the other one should be on the right in the back. And I stitched them on the same side. Thank you so much for that. So I'm just going to take my tape off here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it out. I'm going to take it out of here, and I'm going to put it on the other side. So I don't necessarily have to take this apart because it's right here on the edge. So I'm just going to rip it right out over here and stick it back on the other side. I'm just going to make sure that it's totally straight. Thank you for that so much, Cheryl. I'd have kicked myself. So I'm just taking it out on this side. I'm not ripping the whole thing. That's the other reason that we based in, so it's easy to rip out. Not that you want to rip, but you know, when you do. I'm going to put it back on this side. And I will go back in and baste this in because I want to make sure. So I'll show you again. So my straps were both on this side. So what I need to make sure is that one of the straps ends, they're opposite, right? So they're on opposite sides of my bag. So it makes like a loop. They shouldn't both be over here. So that's what the correction was. So I'm just going to fix this real quick and then come back and do the other piece. So I'm just making sure that it's totally straight here and that I have my 1/4 inch overhang. And I won't take you with me. I'm just going to base this in real quick. So in looking at it now, I'm just going to open it. You could see what the correction was. So one strap is over here and the other strap is over here. I'm just going to make sure that they are totally straight when I lay them down. This will fold down, that'll fold down, and then that'll be right. Okay. So now we can Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Cheryl. So we will have, we're going to align this to the center is what I was saying. And you'll see that we will have 2 completed pieces. Like we did yesterday, we actually had 2 pieces that were completed and we laid one on the other. So now I'm going to stitch this at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And I'm going to go to the sewing machine and I'm going to change my stitch length back to 3. So I think it's my internet that keeps going in and out that's causing, and maybe it's the snow. I don't know. We had snow today and then tomorrow it's going to be like 60. Don't know what's going on with Mother Nature, but she's not happy with us. So let's get this sewn. Make sure that this strap here that's in here is straight. So I'm just going to lift my bag here just to make sure that that strap is straight under there when I sew. Turn your stitch length back down if you had it on basting. Back tack. Since this is it's not as thick, I'm going to back tack over the entire strap again. And then I'm going to go. And back tack at the start and stop. Okay. So now what we have is we have this bag front and back completed with the strap attached. Okay, so we have it. I'll show you. Front and back. Front, back. Double check your straps. Okay. They are opposite. This is ready to go. If we flip it over to the back, we'll see the lining is ready to go. I will top stitch this all when I'm done. So I will top stitch the front and the back when I'm done. So now what we have is we have 2 pieces completed, right? So we had the center piece that we had completed, and we have this piece that we have completed. So the same way that we created that burrito, we have to do it with this. The only thing is it's a little bit more confusing. So we want to make sure that the zippers line up, right? So these zipper pieces line up. This is an exterior piece. This piece here on the other side is an exterior piece. So these should be opening the same way. These are lining pieces right here. So these 2 pieces are lining pieces. See, 40 is okay. I can deal with cold. I just can't deal with snow, with the snow and the ice. Okay. So what we want to do when we do this is we want to be able to sew these 2 pieces or these exterior pieces together. Oh, before I do that, I'm going to cut my corner on my back. I didn't do that. But we want to be able to align the exterior pieces that we sewed to the center pocket with the exterior pieces that we just sewed. So let me just cut these corners here real quick. Like I said, it's the same thing we did yesterday. It's just it's a lot more fabric. And yes, I will be holding my breath, Nancy, the whole time. Okay. All right. So I'm going to keep myself honest with you so I'm not telling you something different. Okay. Great. Okay, so I'm going to put this to the bottom. But really what we want to do, I'll show you what I'm saying. This is an exterior piece and that's an exterior piece. So we have to get these 2 attached. But then we also have to get this exterior piece attached with our front exterior piece. And that's what we're going to do. So what I'm going to do is put my straps to the top. We know that the linings have to match, so make sure your zippers are on the same side. We know that these two pieces have to match, right? So we know that those two pieces have to match. We need to match those two pieces together, and we need to match these two pieces together, right? So that needs to match with this piece. So the way that we're going to do that, and I'm just trying to make sure I do it right. So this piece is going to be right side up. I always put the bottom piece there. This piece, I'm just going to make sure the zipper is opening in the right direction, so it's opening there. I want this piece here on the side of the pocket. There's two pieces, one here, one here. I need this piece to match with this piece at the bottom. It's hard to see, right? So I need this outer piece to match there. So to make that happen, I'm just going to just gently clip this in place so you can see what's happening. So this is wrong sides, that's right sides, right? When these pieces are clipped together, these other pieces have to go out of the way. So this is the burrito fold way. So 1 second. Open my zipper. And we're going to fold this. So we have to fold these pieces out of the way that we're not going to use. Great. Okay. This is the tricky part. And I did this before, believe me. Exterior. Yeah, okay. Got it. Great. So we're going to clip these together. And the way we're going to need to do that is we're going to need to take, with the zipper facing that way to the right-hand side, I'm just going to fold this lining piece, the lining with the center zipper, I'm going to fold it to the middle again. It's very quickly, like that. And then I'm going to fold the other side, the left and the right in, like we did before. That's why I said yesterday you can iron it, but we're going to just wrinkle it again. And then I'm going to fold the bottom up. And I'm going to clip it. Remember I said don't use pins because you're going to have to reach in there and pull this out and you don't want to stick yourself. Okay? By folding it like this, and my zipper, by the way, is pointing over here. It's opposite because I'm going to flip it around this way and then it'll be going in the right direction. Right? So I folded it. Zipper was facing here. Folded these pieces in and left the longer piece exposed at the bottom. Trying to show the longer piece here exposed. When I flip it open, my zipper will be opening the same way as this zipper here. Open this big zipper as well. So you're going to pull that open because we're going to need to turn it through there. I'm then going to take this piece and I'm going to line up the bottom piece with the piece that I flipped over. So I'm going to line these up. I need to make a burrito again. I'm going to add a couple hundred pins in here, clips in here, I mean. It's okay the outside to pin, it's the inside that I didn't want you to pin because you have to stick your hand in there. So I'm just clipping this all together. Then what's going to happen after I clip this is we need to get the linings to match, right? So we're trying to get the front linings and the front backs to match. That's really what's happening here. Okay. So I'm just clipping around, getting everything to match. I bend that seam in towards the lining. So over here where it meets, right here, I fold it in so it meets towards the lining. All right. So now that matches. So if you look at it now, I have matched this because I folded those pieces in. My zippers should face in the same direction, so they're opening in the same direction. But what happens is I now have all of this stuff here that I don't need, right? That's the pieces for the back, and I have the strap. This piece here is for the center. The center had a lining piece, and then the front had a lining piece. So I need these two pieces to match. So I have to move this out of the way. So the way that I do that is I just, with it like this, I actually just put the strap there and I fold it in half. I make sure that that zipper pocket is open right here. And that's the center zipper pocket that I have. And I rotate this and I just shove it in there. So I take these two extra pieces that I don't need, fold it in half with the strap, and I shove it all, by rotating it, I shove it all into that center pocket here to get it out of the way. So I rotate it like 90 degrees and I put it in there to get it out of the way. Get your zipper end out of the way, get everything out of the way. And you can definitely clip everything. Okay. But open your top placket so that you can slip that in there like that. All right, so that came apart. I'm just going to clip this back. So it'll look like that. So it was those extra pieces that I moved out of the way. So now I can actually get to my lining piece for my front and my center. And that's how I'm going to make the burrito. Remember I said all of the stuff is normally down here where the fabric is, not where the waterproof canvas is, which is the lining. So I'm going to use a couple 100 million clips on this. I tell you, we're almost done. I promise you, we're almost done. Okay. Make sure everything is out of the seam allowance, which is 1/4 of an inch. So by rotating that and shoving it in there, it's out of our seam allowance. And I'm just going to clip this around. We have to leave an opening in the lining, remember? So we have to turn this right side out. So we want to make sure we leave that opening in the lining. And I'm just going to push, 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 and clip. I wish I could do through the magic of television. Could you take that off and put the zipper pull? Yes, Nancy, you could do that. I did not put the zipper end on because I don't want it to get scratches. I'm moving it, but absolutely. So I put all the extra, the hardware I don't need immediately. Sorry, my feet were getting cold. The hardware I don't need immediately, I leave off. But yes, you can put the zipper end on, absolutely. So I put the zipper end in at the end. Did you take that off? Yep. So what Nancy was saying is on the zipper, I could actually take the pull completely off, I believe is what you're saying, and then put the zipper pull back on when I was done. And that's on the longer piece. So on the piece, I had a scrap piece here. On this piece, right, I could take the zipper pull off completely. I had you sew this closed, but if you hadn't, you could take it off and then put it back on. Some people aren't comfortable with putting the zipper pull back on, so that's why I left it. So I hope that that's what you were saying, Nancy. All right, so I have everything in here. Remember, here is my burrito. Press it down. Make sure everything is in there really well. Just like I told you yesterday, when you're sewing this, you may want to tilt. I have a lot of things floating around here. You may want to tilt your piece up like this as the sewing machine is going this way, which will help the edges to stay aligned. I'm going to leave in the bottom here a 5-inch. You can leave a 5.5-inch opening. And I'm just going to mark 2 lines for myself so I know where that is. So I'm just, this is my center. So I'm just going 2.5 inches this way and 2.5 inches the other way. Right. So I'm going to leave a 5-inch opening, which is over here. A 5-inch opening so I can turn the bag through. If you want, you can leave a 6-inch opening. It doesn't matter. You can leave as big an opening as you want to leave to turn it out. If you think you're going to need more room, then you can do that. Okay. So I'm going to stitch this. I'm going to start here at my stitch where the opening starts, stitch all the way around, come down the sides, up around and back and stop where I have the mark. And I'm going to back tack at the beginning and at the end. Take your time doing this. Push down if you need to push down. Put 100 million clips in here if that's what you need to make this work for you. And it'll be fine. I promise it'll be fine. Okay? So we're going to do that. We're going to go to the sewing machine and do that. Okay, I lost my sound temporarily, but hopefully I'm back. So, I'm just going to get my camera cord out of the way here so I'm not knocking you guys around and making you dizzy with the cord. Okay. Turn my stitch length back down to 3. Make sure it's right. 1/4 inch seam allowance. Back tack here at the start and the stop. When I get to the corner, I am going to pivot. 1/4 inch from the end. I'm going to lift my presser foot. I will be pivoting. Go along that diagonal edge. Lift again, pivot. Now I can actually feel everything in here, so I can feel if something's close. That strap is right there, so I just pinch it away so it's not interfering with anything. And I am tilting this up ever so slightly to make sure that I don't lose a seam when I unclip this. And I normally keep like an awl, like this awl thing, because it helps me also. Some people it's a stiletto, but it helps me to be able to pull that seam, because I want to make sure that I don't not sew something here. Nothing worse than get to the end, turn it right side out, and then something's not stitched. And I had to backtrack because I don't know if you heard my thread cut. So. And you can see I'm taking my time. I'm not rushing through this. I'm just taking my time, making sure that I get everything. Everything's out of my seam allowance. If you're talking to me, I can't see the comments, so I will look at them when I get back to the front of the laptop. Almost there, almost there. Like I said, it's always hard to sew because I have the camera and I want to make sure that I'm not bumping this camera out of alignment so that you guys can see what I'm doing. And back to the beginning. Okay. So, back to the beginning. Everybody can breathe, including me. So we're going to take a look and see what this looks like when we turn it right side out. So this is what it looks like. It's all sealed in. I'm checking my seams. Got a little wonky over here on the side, but that's okay. So I'm going to take that. I'm going to reach in there. And I'm going to pull out very carefully. Try to pull out that my back piece that's here. And then what I'm going to do is reach all the way down into the bag. Push this corner out. And I should be able to pull. So you should be able to get on either side. So I'm on the front side of my bag where I folded it. And I should be able to push that corner in towards the top of the bag, or where the opening is. And this will be a little bit more challenging, but you'll actually understand why, like I said yesterday, that I did not use Decovil Light for the entire bag. Nor did I use foam. for the bag because I did not want to have, well, I didn't want to cry and I didn't want to cause you guys to be in tears. I could probably pull out that strap. Get my hand on it. Once again, you can hit this with a blow dryer or, steam. Don't rest the iron directly on this, but steam the waterproof canvas. If you need to open this up again to get a little bigger opening, you can. It's hard to be on camera and do this, so I am exiting the camera sphere while I do this just to get this out. Okay, so I basically pushed it all in there, so it should be easier to come out the top. Easier to get it out the top now. Take out those clips. Once again, this is why I don't use pins. I don't recommend pins. Take out those clips. Don't tug too hard on this, like I told you yesterday. Don't pull too hard, but you have to be firm. And then I start to curl the waterproof canvas. So I take the pieces, like the corners, and I poke them out for that lining to start curving it so I can start pushing the other pieces out. Don't worry about it. You're going to iron it, so it doesn't matter if it gets wrinkles. So that was the flap. That was the back. I told you to open up the zipper. And the open up the zipper was to make it easier. If you leave it closed, it's a more rigid piece. But it makes it easier to pull it out if you open it up. Okay, so that's the zipper. Got a little nervous. It came out so quickly, but I got nervous because it just let loose. But it's just a zipper. It is coming. This is the hardest. The back shouldn't be so hard because we don't have that pocket in the front. It's the pocket in the front that with the Decoville that's causing this to be very difficult or a little bit more challenging. But you can see I'm getting there because I have more clips that I can see. Almost. And the home stretch. And then somebody said, oh, they don't have to work out because birthing a bag is a workout. It's almost out, almost out. You can see my zipper here. It's right at the end. That's why I told you to stitch it closed. Almost out. There we go. All right, something happened. I don't know what it is, but something happened. So this is just the lining. I'm just shoving it back in there for right now. But you're going to stick your hand in that opening and poke out those corners for your front, just like you did with the center pockets. I'm just poking out, sticking my hand in here and poking them out. I know there may have been a lot of time I was off camera, but it's hard to do it on camera, you know, because I use my body to poke this bag a little bit, coax it out. So I'm sticking my hand in that lining opening. I'm rolling it. You should find that the bottom over here is not as stiff because we cut out that waterproof canvas from the bottom. And then I'm just going to fold this lining in a little bit just so I can show you. All right. And I'm just going to very quickly zip this up. Quickly, not so quickly. Zip this up. Just straighten out the zipper. It's not cooperating. Okay. There we go. Whew. Okay. So now what you can see, I'm just going to flip this down a little bit. So now, as you can see, we have the front pocket done. So the front is done. Done. Like I said, poke those out. I'll poke those out a little bit more, but the pocket is done in the front. If I unzip this here and I flip it towards you, you'll see this is the center pocket. So the only other thing that we need to do is attach the back pocket. So then we'll have a complete bag. So we've got one more burrito, and then I'll come back and I'll sew up my linings for the front and the back. So I'll come back and do those all at once, and I'll do some top stitching as well. But all we have now is this piece to do. And then once that's done, the entire bag will be complete. And then we just have 2 pieces of hardware to put on. So what we're going to do now, because we have to get this to attach to this. Okay. We know that we want this piece to attach to that, right? The 2 lining pieces to attach. If I flip this over to the front, right, we're going to need a piece over here. The piece that goes over here is this piece here. So to get to that piece, to get to this piece, I'm going to need to fold in this entire piece here to the middle. And that's the only way that I'm going to get this piece to match the bottom and the lining to match. So I'm going to have to fold in that center pocket. So I'm doing the same thing now. This is a little bit stiffer, right? So we know that it's going to be a little bit stiffer because it's more fabric, but it's definitely doable. So we're going to fold this in just like that. And we're going to fold the bottom up just like that. So really we just need enough to keep it out of the seam allowance, 1/4 inch seam allowance. And we're going to put a clip or 2 or 5, whatever it takes to hold it. So I'm going to put a clip right here. Oops. Let's try this again. Try and do it on camera so you guys can see. So what's nice is that I can clip it under here, in here, which is thinner, because I just need it to stay. You can clip this piece, and I'm just going to tuck the zipper end in here. So tuck everything in and away is really what you're trying to do, right? Put that there. I can clip this side. We just want everything away from the lining, from the where we're going to sew the seam allowance. So like I said, I know it's a little bit thicker, but you can do it. And honestly, once you clip it, it doesn't really have to stay because it's away from the lining. It's away from the seam allowance. So what'll happen is when you press it down, it automatically stays there, it won't fly back. And then make sure you open that center pocket zipper. Make sure you open that up. Okay. And then this one has to be opened as well. You can tuck everything out of the way. I'm just going to put it right here at the bottom because that's where I put all my burrito stuff. You'll then have the lining exterior for your back piece exposed, and you can fold that over. So I just want to get the zipper out of the way. You can fold this over like this, push down, and start clipping. So I normally start at the bottom. It'd be easier to sew the back first. Maybe you can sew the back first. It doesn't, both of them have to be folded and pulled out. So if it's easier to do the back, you can do the back. The directions may say as well to do the back. It's the same thing. Anyhow you do it, front or back, you still have to do the same level of folding. If you do the back, you still then have to tuck the front in. So whichever one is easier for you. And I honestly don't remember which one I had you do in the directions, whether it was the front or the back first. Okay. So I'm going to fold that down. Like I said, once you get the pieces in, if they're not, let the clips hold, even if it's just temporary, just long enough to be able to do it, to get this clipped around. And like I said, I definitely push it down. And I think what I'll do in this one is I'll leave a bigger opening at the bottom, just so I can turn it quicker. But you can definitely, I like to leave as small opening as I can, but you can definitely make it bigger or smaller. But this one I'll leave it open just so I'm not boring you all with me trying to turn it right side out. Okay. So now I'm doing the bottom. I'm sorry, I'm taking this out of the view of the camera. But all I'm doing is clipping. That's all I'm doing. I'm not doing anything fancy. I'm just going to add a couple more clips to the side. All right, and then we have our burrito. So I'm going to mark, like I said, an opening here. And I'll just make this one 6 inches just because I want to turn it quicker. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to stitch all the way around, back tack at the start and the stop, leave this piece here open so we can turn the bag right side out. And then we're almost done. We'll just have some top stitching to do and adding our hardware in, and we will be done. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine. 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around, and a stitch length of 3. Okay, so we are done, hopefully. I'm going to just double check my seams to make sure I didn't miss, like I did not catch something. And then we'll turn this inside out, or right side out, I should say. Not inside out, right side out. Okay. So that is our bag. We're going to stick our hand in here again. Should have left all of your zippers open. I'm going to stick my hand into one of these corners. Find a corner. I keep sticking into a pocket instead of sticking it into a corner. Okay, there we go. Be careful when you're pulling. I have the seam here. Be careful when you're pulling that pocket out, because you don't want to rip any of those stitches. So I'm just turning this. Find my strap. And I'm just going to turn this right side out. Just looking for my clips. Like I said, I left this opening a little bit bigger. It's 6 instead of 5.5. So if you need to leave it bigger, absolutely leave it bigger. Because of the angular corners, you can only leave it so big. So other than that, you're gonna have to, you won't get the corners. Since it's a lining, I don't think it matters as much if you don't care about that. I'm not I popped the stitch. I'm not pulling through. I'm not using my strap to pull, because I don't want to dislodge my strap. So just something to be aware of. And that pop you heard was just my back stitch on my bottom. It wasn't anything. And that's just me. That's just me being impatient, because it is coming out. There it goes again. Okay, so I'm going to fix that when I get it. And I'll show you what happened. And just be careful when you're pulling it, because remember, I didn't put rivets. Nancy put rivets in hers, but this doesn't have any rivets, so there's nothing really holding it. And I'll show you what was snapping. But now it's out. And we will be giving this a good press. And I'll show you what happened. So when I go back and sew the pocket, I'll fix it. But let's see. I top stitched. Let's see if I can get in here for you. I'm sorry, I stitched the corners. So over here, where my mark is, I stitched over to the corner and back. What was popping was this corner here. So it ripped out almost, actually ripped out to the corner on this side. that diagonal, it ripped back to that diagonal. So when I go back in and sew it, I'll start from here, sew it across, and then fold it under, just to fix that. So that's what that popping was. It wasn't anything, I didn't break anything. It's just something that happens. Okay. So I'm going to poke out my corners on my back. Poke those corners out. I have the thread hanging out over there. Poke out all of your corners. I always tuck my lining back in and fit it in. It's just something I do, and then I pull it back out just to make sure everything is flat. So I did it on the front, and I'm going to do it on this piece as well. I'll just pull it down. So pull it down. Put both of your hands in that bag, like both of my hands are in here, and then I just separate them like this. And that's a good way also to make sure that you have that lining in there as well as you can have it in there. I'm checking my straps. I'm going to zip this up. Okay. So my straps are right. Thank you, Cheryl. My straps are on there the right way. And just pressing it flat. But now you have everything in there. So the middle is in there. The two pieces, the front and the back, are in there. We're going to give it a good press. And then you would top stitch it. So I'm just going to very quickly cut some threads on here. Hold on. Cut some threads on here. But it is almost done. I'm going to, if you look at it, you now have your pockets. So I have my back pocket, I have my center pocket, I have my front pocket, or the reverse. And then on either side over here, I have those two extra pockets. All right. I'm going to roll down my linings. So remember, I top stitched in here. I top stitched these when I attached them. For this piece here, because I did that, I only have to top stitch from seam to seam. I don't have to top stitch all the way around. So that's why I did that. I could have left it and top stitched each pocket separately all the way around. But this way I only have to top stitch from seam to seam. And I start at the widest point. So I start over here. And I top stitch all the way around to the other seam. And then I do the same thing on the back. I start here and top stitch all the way around to the other seam. So then I don't have to top stitch all of this in here. So that's why I did the top stitching that way. So, interest of time, I'm just going to, and I'll press this later. I'm just going to show you the top stitching, and then I won't iron it. I won't bore you guys with the ironing, but I will top stitch it. And then we'll go from there. So I'll leave that to you to iron it. You know, I give it an iron before I top stitch, and then I normally give it another iron after I top stitch. And we'll seal up these pockets, okay? So the first thing we'll do is we'll close up the pockets. I'll go back and fix the errors of my way. But I'm going to pull this pocket out. I poke out the corners. I reverse poke them out to get it as flat as I can. Like this. And then what I do is I fold this under by about 1/4 of an inch. And then I fold the opposite side under the same amount. And then I meet them together, right? I make sure they meet. And then I'll put a clip in them like this all the way around. So I'll do that for that one. and then you have to do the front. If you didn't do your center, make sure you go back and do your center. We did it, but if you left it thinking, oh, I'll come back later and do it, now is later. Now is the time to do it. So I'm going to do that right now. And then while I'm at the sewing machine, after I do this, so I'll do it all in one trip to the sewing machine. I will sew these pockets, and after I sew the pocket, I will top stitch around the bag so that when I come back, all I have to do is put on the remaining hardware. Okay, so you clip this in place. I have a little repair to do. Like I said, iron before. When you do the top stitching, what I will say to you is that depending on your machine, when I top stitch this down, and I'll show you on the finished bag, when I top stitch this down, I fold in the flap. So I'll show you what I did. Okay, so when I top stitched, I took the flap, which was flat like this. I made sure to smooth the lining, and then I folded in, I pinched and folded it in, and I top stitched it like this. So both of these pieces, there were like 4 pieces of fabric here, they were top stitch. And that's because if you do it that way, it will give a nice square top to the bag. If your machine cannot handle that thickness, then what I'm going to recommend is that you not fold it under, but rather lay it flat like this and top stitch from seam to seam. So then you have less fabric, and you should be able to top stitch from one seam to the other seam. Make sure when you're stitching from seam to seam that you have your strap itself should be up and out of the way. So make sure your strap is not folded down when you're stitching it that way, and you're going to stitch from the outside of the bag. That's the way I did it. If you are comfortable stitching from the inside of the bag, you can do that as well. So when I go over, I'll show you what I'm doing and I'll explain it again. But that's what I did. I pinched it like this, and then I stitched it so that I can get that nice flat top. Okay, so let's go to the sewing machine and do the last, hopefully the last bit of sewing. I may forget that I did so. I I was over there talking to myself. No worries. So we're done with the sewing. I was just saying that when you sew around this piece, take your time, especially over the thicker pieces. You don't have to um, sew it like I did. I was just reminding you, don't have to sew it like I did to where I folded it under. That's all I was saying. And I was saying if you're going to fold it under, make sure that you pull this lining piece as tight as you can. So you're going to make sure that you fold it, the lining piece down into the bag before you fold it over, so it's totally flat on the inside. But I've done the entire thing. I fixed my mistakes. So that's the other thing. Notice my zippers are going in the right direction or the same direction. I'm sorry, not the right direction. If you get them in there backwards, don't worry about it, really. Don't worry about it. It'll just be your sample bag. And everything is in there. If you want to, at this point, you can definitely stick a rivet. If you have a rivet machine or you know how to add it manually, you can stick a rivet here and you can stick a rivet back here if you want to on your strap to secure your strap. Given that there's Decoville light in these pieces, you don't have to worry about, adding that. The center pocket, there was none. So that's why I said if you added it in, because you're afraid these seams over here will rip, that to make sure you put a piece of Decoville light just to secure that rivet so it doesn't rip through. So our bag is done. I do have some threads to clean up. I'm seeing them sticking out, but the bag itself is complete. We just have to add our 2 pieces of hardware that we did not add. And then I will leave it to you to give it a good iron. So let's talk about the hardware. The other thing I mentioned while I was at the sewing machine was that in your kit, if you got a kit, you got this tag. And I didn't cover how to install the tag because the video is on YouTube as well as in the private group. And those people may not have a tag. So, and I didn't include it in the pattern. So if you need to include a tag, you would just base stitch your tag onto wherever you want. So it's usually like in the lining. Some people put it on the outside. And then before you sew the pieces together, just base stitch it in so it sits wherever you want it to sit. And then just sandwich it together between your lining and your exterior fabric, and it will be inside your bag. So I think you've seen it in garments. Maybe I'll do a little video about attaching a tag. It's not complicated at all, but I also realized not everybody used the tag in the kit, that some people save it. So, all right. So we have the zipper end, this zipper end that goes to the end of our zipper. And we have the flip lock. And if you have the kit, you also got, or you got your subscription box, you also got a little screwdriver. And for those of you who've been with me, you probably have tons of these little screwdrivers. So I'm just going to get something so I don't lose my screws. I thought that's funny. It's like losing your marbles. I don't want to lose my screws. So I'm going to get a piece of lint roller paper over here because they are small. I recommend that you keep a dish close by for when you have screws, just to have something to put it in. Some people have a magnetic dish. So I'm just going to use a piece of lint roller paper to hold it. I would also recommend, if you're using that you put this, you leave the protective layer on. When I went to the machine, I realized that when I came back because I disconnected myself. I misplace mine all the time. Actually, I keep, every time I go to do a video, I'm going, where's the screw? Because I normally keep one in here, but it always goes someplace. So I would recommend that you leave the protective coating on if your hardware comes with it. If it doesn't come with it, what I recommend you do, and I'm looking around here because of course I don't have any, is you get a piece of either foam. This is Decoville See if I have a piece of foam or a piece of fabric, something. Okay, so this is interfacing. And you get something that you can turn this if it doesn't have the coating so it doesn't get scratched. And then you unscrew that screw, and I'll do the zipper end first. Place it someplace that it won't get lost. So I stick it on the lit roller paper. And then to install this, the way you're going to do that is you're going to, and I'll zoom in so you can see, clean up this end first. And what you're going to do is you're going to fold the zipper. So this is the zipper. I'm just going to clean it up a little bit here. It's frayed while I've been sewing. Okay. Yes, don't tell anybody I did use my good sewing scissors. This is what it looks like. On the wrong side, you're going to fold one end to the middle and the other end to the middle. So it'll look like that. All right. Some people will do it. They'll fold in half and in half again. I don't find that you need to do that. You just need to fold one end to the middle, the other end to the middle. This is an extra large one, so that's why you don't need to do it. And it fits right in there. See, it goes right in there. Then what you're going to do is you're going to return that screw that you took out to that hole. Some people use glue. I actually normally use a sealer. It's thread lock or thread tight. That's what it's called. But I'm just going to stick this in there. If you want, you can add some glue to the bottom. So I know people also add glue to the bottom of their zipper and stick it in there to help it stay in there, like E6000 glue or one of those glues. And then you're going to just screw it in. Make sure it goes in. It should go in straight. If it doesn't go in straight, take it back out, because you don't, to keep turning it and trying to force it in there, you'll strip the threads, and you'll strip the screw head on top. So once you've done that and it's in there, if you give it a tug, it doesn't come out. So now I have my zipper end on there, and when I'm ready to, I can take off the paper. So the other piece that I need to add is the flip lock piece, this piece here. And this also has screws. This has actually 3 screws in it. So I'm going to take them all out one at a time. And take them out over your dish. Don't take them out, pull your dish close to you and take them out over your dish or wherever you're going to put them to keep them safe, because there's nothing worse than you doing it over your cutting mat and it rolls away. Okay. So now I've taken them out. The easiest way to do this is to flip your flip lock, this piece here up, slide this over it, take your flap and stick your flap into that space. So then you know exactly where it needs to be. So when you look at it, you want to make sure that it's aligned. So if you say it's right there, sometimes if your bag is off center and you try to put it center and then you put it on and say it's crooked, nobody's going to notice it. So just get it on there in such a way that it's, it fits the lock, right? So if this side is a little bit wider than that side, it doesn't matter. All right. So that's where I'm going to put it. Okay. I press it against the flap because that's where it's going to be, and I hold it in place just like that. If you want, you can also make a mark. So I can do this. Use my erasable pen. And this is heat erasing. So if I hit it with heat, it's going to work. Right. I can draw a line around the top of it so I know exactly where it needs to go, like that. I'm going to take it off and I can screw it on. Right. So I'm holding this in place. Hold it firmly, guys, and then you're going to flip it over, and then you're going to put the screws back in. Now, these screws are a little smaller, so make sure that there's some place that they don't roll away. So I'm just going to stick that screw right in there, and I'm going to screw it down. You can start with the center screw. You can start with the end screw. It doesn't matter. Just Once you get the first one in, the others are that much easier. Like I said, you just have to get the first one in, and then the others are, because then the first one will hold it in place. So that one's in, and then I just have to screw the other ones in. And one more. Oops. Okay. So now all I do is flip this over this, flip it down, okay, flip it down, and it is on there. Okay. So I finished this. I finished everything. That was the last part of the bag. Let's take a look at it. Make sure we have all of our pieces here. And I was thinking about how much time it took. I mean, talking and everything, I think it took 9 hours to make it. There was some work offline, but because I talked a lot. But that's our bag. That's our bag. So we're done. We have our flip lock installed. We have our zipper here. I didn't mention this, but when we attach this, it creates that other pocket that goes in the back. Our zipper closure, our zipper end. Believe it or not, you guys made 5 pockets in here. So there's one here, center pocket, one on the other side, and one here. So it's like an origami little puzzle that's going on here. And then we attached our adjustable strap. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this. I thank you so much for joining me and hanging out with me as I went through this. I'm hoping those people who are able to log into YouTube and see the video, especially in the group, because it was something that was asked for from within the private group, that this makes it easier for you to look at the video and complete your project. So I'm excited to see everybody's bag, and I'm excited to start boxing up the bags for this month, which I've talked about in the group a little bit, but we'll do the sew along, and then everybody else will get to see it on YouTube. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I will be talking to you again inside of our group. Have a great evening and a great week. Bye-bye.